It's a final in Arlington as Coach Joey McGuire and the Texas Tech Red Raiders beat BYU for the second time this year. There's the celebration. Liquid 34-7 is your final, and for Texas Tech, the 12 wins is the most in program history, one better than Mike Leach's team in 2008. Up next for the Red Raiders, a first-round bye in the college football playoff. BYU will have to sweat things out the rest of the way when it comes to the CFP. That's the sense of the Big 12 championship. Let's head out to Indianapolis, where Jenny Dell anchors our coverage, getting us ready for the Big 10 championship.
All right, Tommy, thank you so much. I'm here with Cardale Jones. We got Danny Kanell here. You're getting not bothered. There's a lot of fans.
Bombarded.
12 Gauge is a legend. He can't go anywhere without
I'm getting supported.
So much support. A lot of Buckeyes fans are out. Some might join our show. I don't know. They've been just coming in, popping in for a good time. We've got the Fan Fest here in Indianapolis going on behind us. We just missed a pizza eating competition that we wanted to be involved in.
Drunk Evan won, by the way.
Drunk Evan? I don't think Drunk Evan won. I think the other guy won.
Oh,
yeah,
really?
I think Drunk
Upset
Evan
of the
would
day.
Win. All right, but what is fun about what we get to do today is, yes, we're focused on the Big 10 championship, of course, but we get to watch football all day. So we just finished watching that Big 12 championship between BYU and Texas Tech. Texas Tech coming out on top. Of the question here is, you watch that game, you see what they were able to do. BYU initially came out strong, and then it was, Texas Tech the rest of the way. But do you think that they can withstand success in the college football playoff? Cardale, let's start with you.
I think so. You saw how emotional this coaching staff was after this big win, because they know they just punched their ticket. That's one of not just the college football playoffs, but solidified themselves as one of the top 4 teams in all of college football. And they've been playing consistent without that one slip up earlier in the season, a little loss. They've been playing some of the most consistent football. Baird Morton, he had I wouldn't say a complete game, but he had a clean game to it. 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. That's some of the things that we want to see from a team that's going to go to this playoff system and really compete with the other top guys around the country. So Texas Tech is going to be a team that's going to be scary for anyone facing off in the college football playoffs.
This, by the way, this Big 12 championship game was the most unnecessary game of the day.
Oh, come on.
We saw this game unfold in the regular season. It was almost identical, except it was even more dominant from Texas Tech. The first time around, Texas Tech held them to 67 yards rushing. Today, only 63 yards rushing for BYU. The first time around, Texas Tech forced 3 turnovers. Today, 4 turnovers. I don't think Texas Tech is a legit national title threat. I'm worried about Baird Morton in that offense. He's a little bit too erratic for me. They don't have depth. They lost their backup quarterback, Will Hammond, to an ACL injury. Baird Morton is somebody who's dealt with concussions. He's been banged up. But even more so, just watching him play, it's a lot of bubble screens. It's a lot of underneath throws. I think their defense is really, really good. And that's where they spent a lot of their money. But the offense, it kind of reminds me of Oklahoma. Like in Oklahoma, I think they're better than Oklahoma on offense. But I don't think they're a team that could go toe-to-toe with the teams that are here tonight, Ohio State or Indiana. Because guess what? They have great defenses, but they also have great offenses. In order to win a national championship, you have to be good on both sides of the ball. And I just feel like Texas Tech is a little bit too one-dimensional and a little bit too defensively dominant to win it all.
You mentioned that we've seen this matchup before. 6 of the 9 conference championships.
Yeah.
Are redos, the matchups that we saw in the regular season. So that's just the way it sometimes plays out. So hearing what Danny said, do you agree? Do you disagree with just them making kind of a run?
Yeah, I mean, the comparison is very relatable to that Oklahoma team, having a really good defense and then not as impressive on offense, especially at the quarterback position. But I do think they can do enough on the offensive side of the ball. It reminds me of not as great of a running game as last year, but it reminds me of that Notre Dame team last year. Really good defense, very underwhelming at the quarterback position, but did the things that they did at a very high rate and efficient. I think they can really make some noise in the playoffs, sticking to the recipe that they played with all year up until this point.
Okay, so you just mentioned Notre Dame, and by them winning, right, with Texas Tech getting the win here, this has kind of created the scenario that you've wanted. You want the chaos.
I want the chaos,
and
yes,
the chaos is
chaos.
now here. So what does happen? You look at Miami, you look at Notre Dame. How's it going to play out?
Well, my opinion doesn't change on none of this, right? The head-to-head has to matter. When you look at the strength of schedule for both teams, Miami has the edge. Look at the head-to-head, Miami has the edge. And then we came up with a pretty cool stat. We found we did a little stat digging over the last couple of days. The opponents that Notre Dame has played, they haven't played a defense defense that was ranked better than 105th in this 10-game stretch. So the things that they did on the football field, I will argue they were supposed to do those things because they put themselves in a hole by starting 0-2 early in the season versus two quality teams, versus two teams that should be in the college football playoffs. They have the head-to-head matchup over Miami. I'm giving them the nod over Miami. I'm giving Miami the nod over Notre Dame when you talk about that last spot from one of these power conferences.
You know how the committee, like, they're supposed to be sequestered. They're not supposed to listen, and they're supposed to go in that room, and they take off their stupid hats, and they go in there.
Stupid hats.
They listen. And I think if they've been listening, and not only to Mario Cristobal and to Miami backers, but if they listen to football analysts, I would say like 90% of college football analysts, guys like you, guys like myself, people that cover the game, are all like, what are we doing? What? They played on the field. And I feel like the committee has listened, and they've heard it enough times and heard it drilled into their ears that, you know what? Everyone is right. So I do think Miami, I did not think they had a chance. I thought they were going to get screwed. But I do think now that they're right there, now that the committee has heard some of the pressure from people saying, why schedule games if they're not going to matter on the field? I do think the committee is finally going to pay attention to the noise and pay attention to everyone who's saying, we saw this matchup already. That has to matter. I do think Miami will get the nod.
Okay, throw away the records for a moment. Which team do you deem more talented that you think could make a further playoff run between Notre Dame and Miami? Is it still Miami for you?
No, I think at this point, I think it's still Miami for me, and especially with them getting healthy, and especially having guys like Malachi Tony on the outside. Carson Beck over the last 4 weeks has been completing north of 80% of his passes. You see what they did to a really good Virginia team who pretty much went into Atlanta and dominated Georgia Tech, the ACC favorite, the last game of the season. This team is scary, and I think they're peaking at the right time. We talked about that earlier. You want to peak at the right time. Miami is peaking at the right time and getting healthy at the right time.
There's been a lot made, and again, here I guess would be the Notre Dame argument, is, we would be favored. Like, the odds makers would have us favored. And if I had that, I would love it, because I would take Miami as an underdog, and I'd pick them on the money line to win the game. I think Miami is the better football game because we saw them play already. And Mario Cristobal made a great point. We talked to him the other day. Notre Dame, that was their first game, and it was C.J. Carr's first game. You know who else's it was? Carson Beck, an entire defense. A lot of those guys playing in Corey Heatherman's defense for the first time. Miami is a better team now as well. You mentioned the finish in November. Going undefeated in the month of November was huge. They're playing some of their best football. I thought the game against Pitt was Miami's best game of the season. I think it's not even close. Miami would do more damage in the playoffs than Notre Dame.
You did chat with Mario Cristobal yesterday. It was an incredible conversation. What were some of your biggest takeaways from that?
I kind of told him this. I was like, I feel bad that he has to politic, but it is part of the job now because of the system that we're in. But I feel like he's just stating the obvious. I mean, he's got all his talking points. He's got everything there. He's got the statistics that back him. But ultimately, it comes down to, we played this team already. And I do think even the score was not indicative of how dominant the game was for the Miami Hurricanes. They held Jeremiah Love to 33 yards. They contained that. C.J. Carr did not look like he looked like a freshman quarterback making his first start. They dominated the game. So that resonated to me. And the other thing that resonated is Mario Cristobal's hope that the committee is going to finally do the right thing come Sunday.
All right, so the SEC championship is about to kick off in, we got about like 25 minutes until then. Now, the question that I'm going to ask you, though, if Alabama beats Georgia, should they get a bye over Texas Tech?
Not a chance. No, I don't think a bye. But clearly they're going to be a playoff team, but getting that bye, saying they're one of the top 4 teams in the country, I don't think so. I think you have Oregon right there waiting in the weeds at that number 5 spot. I can't remember who's number 6 right now, but I'm a Texas Tech that's clearly going to be up there. And then I mentioned this all day to this point that the results of this game, to me, in that top 4 ranking doesn't matter. Both teams would probably at worst drop to number 4. But trying to give Bama that nod over a team they already beat already, I guess if they dominate this Georgia team, who's playing some of the best football of anybody right now, then that's a legitimate argument. But as right now, winning a close game, I don't think so.
So I think they would. It's the SEC champion, and we know how the committee in college football feels about the SEC, so I do think they would. But I think it would be, the 4 teams with a bye would be Indiana, Ohio State in some order. It could be 1 and 4. Then you would get Texas Tech, and then you would get Georgia or Alabama. I think those are the buys, the 4 buys in this team.
All right,
so the ACC's on the outside looking in, so with the group of 5. Like, I think it's pretty easy. And I just think that I think Alabama would make that significant of a jump. They would have beaten Georgia twice. People forget about the Alabama loss.
Right.
So I think they would be in there as the SEC champion. They would put them in spot.
All right. Well, we will wait and see how that game plays out. We're going to be watching it alongside our little TV over here that we get to watch all of these games. And Tommy, I know you're holding it down in the Fort Lauderdale studio, so we're going to send it back to you. We're going to party here in Indy for a little bit longer.
Yeah, FanFest certainly looking like it's a good time. Again, 1v2 where you guys are at Lucas Oil Stadium for Indiana and Ohio State later tonight. Back here on set here in South Florida at CBS Sports HQ, I'm Tommy Tran with Brandon Marcello and Mackenzie Brooks to talk about the Big 12 championship game. First one in Red Raiders history in terms of winning the Big 12. Brandon, what stood out to you about yet another dominant performance over the Cougars today?
I love that defense. The defense has been incredible. And you look back, I mean, they have been dominant in the Big 12 all season. They've won every game in the Big 12 by 3 touchdowns or more. That is stellar. Now you start wondering, what are they going to look like beyond that? My issue with this team is that their offense seems to leave 2 or 3 touchdowns on the field every game. The final scores look nice, but when we get into a situation where they have to play tougher competition, what are they going to do in the red zone? Well, look what they did in the red zone today. 1 of 5 in the red zone scoring touchdowns. They had to settle for field goals once again. The score looks nice, but once again, I've got to see this offense be able to score touchdowns when they get in the red zone.
It's interesting because when you look at Texas Tech, they have some stark numbers in terms of explosive plays, number 1 in FBS. Every win this year, the 12 that they've had have been at least by 20 points or more, yet there's still always sort of an eye test of left to be desired, which is stalling in the red zone, settling for some field goals, and that's why sometimes the national conversation around Coach McGuire's team has some hesitation when it comes there. A little bit more about what their path is down the road, but there's certainly a lot of eyeballs in South Bend and Coral Gables in terms of this Big 12 championship game. What's the fallout from BYU's loss today?
Right. I mean, all this chaos we've been talking about with Notre Dame, with Miami, we did need BYU to lose that game. So now we can finally continue that conversation. And I've always said and been tracking the odds makers and their lines that Notre Dame's chance in was directly correlated to BYU losing. So you see them go from around minus 300 at halftime of that game to now closer to minus 600. Kind of odds makers telling us, and potentially the committee, this makes it a very, very, very favorable spot for Notre Dame. Now, with that said, you still see Miami on the board. You can still technically bet on them. They're one of 5 to 6 teams you can bet on. And this is going to be a big, big factor because BYU was that gap in between these 2 teams. Now, this is not my opinion. This is not me trying to make my case of who should be in Notre Dame or Miami. But what I will say, and trying to understand what odds makers are saying, what the committee is telling us, taking BYU out of that, now they're right here, right? And now finally, as if we needed to get to this point for them to go head-to-head, this would be Miami's shot into the playoff. Now that BYU buffer isn't there anymore, now you're looking directly into what, the 5th tiebreaker, are we going to call it now, that we're finally at head-to-head here. So this was huge for Miami. This was huge for Notre Dame. Odds makers obviously making it seem like it is Notre Dame's spot, but Miami's still rocking around a 20% chance to make it in.
I wanted to reiterate this point. They made this point, the committee, that they could move Notre Dame over Miami despite being behind them throughout this process. And I caught up with Hunter Yurachek, the chairman, once again in the middle of the week, and he said that point still remains. We could very well do that. Of course, they all got to get it together. The thing that concerns me about Miami, and I think we were discussing this outside earlier, they just got some help with Boise State winning the Mountain West Conference Championship because Notre Dame played Boise State. Yeah. Miami's sitting at home right now really with no way to get any help.
Right. That's what we were looking at, because when the FPI for Boise State goes up, obviously the FPI for Notre Dame is going to go up as well. So that was probably the worst thing for Miami. That's not going to help their case in any way.
I was going to say, don't bring up 5th tiebreakers to Miami fans. They already do dealing with that over in the ACC when it comes to potential at-large situations. One last thing back on Texas Tech, because we've talked about the reservations about them making it all the way. Ken's, what's some of the projections we have for the Red Raiders, and given that we think they're going to get a first-round bye and then potentially who they might face down the road, and then interesting to see where Brandon thinks that they may have a hiccup here?
Yeah, so we're assuming the committee will give them the 4 seed. I think you're going to see the obviously Big Ten champion, the runner-up. You're going to see the SEC champion, especially if it's Georgia over Alabama. That's likely what you're going to see. I can't imagine they'd have them higher than 4, but I can't imagine they'd have them lower. In that scenario, obviously they would play the winner of the 5-12. So right now our 5-12 is Oregon, Tulane. Then we have Texas Tech going on to play Oregon, and we only give them a 42% chance to beat Oregon. I'm curious to see what that spread would be if we do see Oregon at 5. There's a chance maybe it's Ole Miss at 5, which would be great news for Texas Tech, but I have a feeling with all the drama that has unfolded, I don't see Ole Miss squeaking back up to that 5.
Okay, so Brandon, it could be Oregon. Again, give me a sense of a team that we project to be in the field that would be better than Texas Tech in your eyes, that would beat them head-to-head.
I'll say this, probably maybe Ole Miss. I think they would beat Oregon. I like the way that defense has been playing, like we mentioned earlier with Texas Tech. I like the way they match up, especially up front, trying to make things difficult for Dante Moore there at quarterback. Ole Miss, though, they're playing obviously in the playoff for the first time ever. Lane Kiffin's gone. I do think there's a lot more motivation here for them. They're going to feel slighted no matter what, even though they're in the playoff for the first time ever. And I think Charlie Weiss Jr. calling the plays is going to have something to prove, because as much as we want to discuss it, that Lane Kiffin doesn't call the plays. Lane Kiffin's calling the plays, and I can guarantee you Charlie Weiss is going to go into this with something for whoever their first opponent is in the playoff.
It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out on Sunday. As for what we know Saturday, after that noon slate of the Big 12 championship game, it is a repeat performance from their first meeting out in Lubbock, which we saw Texas Tech dominate BYU. Today, BYU came out swinging. First defensive stop, scoring on their first drive, but after that, it was all Red Raiders all day long.